it's the last frontier. I mean, who can explore death and what's on the other side and let us know? Nobody, right? Except world religions. One religion has claim to deaths and resurrections. Others, they speculate about what's on the other side. But the point is, it's the last great mystery. And if you're going to write horror, where do those creepy feelings live? Well, pretty much everybody fears death.
Welcome to Speculative Sandbox, your audio playground for creative storytellers. My name is Vicky Lawn, and each episode, I and a guest will unpack a fiction trope with an eye for character development and narrative structures. Make sure to look for Speculative Sandbox on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, where you can join the conversation. Leave comments or questions, or let us know what other tropes we should cover. When the real world just doesn't cut it, let's get lost in a fictional one.
This episode is brought to you by Stars. Lisa Tadeo's best-selling book is about to become your favorite new show. Based on a true story, the new Stars original series 3 Women stars Shailene Woodley as Gia, a grieving and struggling writer who embarks on a cross-country road trip where she meets 3 women determined to radically change their lives. This one is not to be missed. Watch the season premiere of 3 Women now, only on Stars and the Stars app.
Resurrection is defined as the act of restoring a dead person to life. For today's episode, author John James Minster and I look at all the ways a dead person can be restored, including the realistic, like medical revivals, to the fantastic, like Frankenstein's monster, zombies, and vampires. We even explore religious and cultural interpretations of a revived soul in different forms, like reincarnation and spirits. How far can we go to defy the permanence of death? And will we ever truly know what happens to us after we've passed? John James Minster, thank you so much for joining Speculative Sandbox. Can we get started by learning a little bit about yourself and your latest projects?
Hi, Vicky. Thanks for having me. Real pleasure. I follow you guys closely on Instagram and whatnot. And just wanted to where I'm at. I have a book that got published October 31st, so Halloween release, and its title is The Undertaker's Daughter, a novel of supernatural horror.
Okay.
And that is out there. There's reviews are piling in. There's something like 60 reviews on Goodreads and
Nice job.
whatnot.
That's
So
great.
yeah. So starting to get feedback and I have another one that is finished and will be submitted to publishers, and the title is The Vengeful Dead, but it's
Ooh.
actually a collection of 9 short stories, each one wholly different, but there's a common thread that dead doesn't mean gone, and sometimes they have axes to grind. So
Oh.
yeah, it's pretty fun stuff.
How long does it take you to complete a novel?
Well, it depends. I mean, like the Undertaker's Daughter, I wanted to write about the subject matter, which was golem, if you're familiar with the term golem.
Mm-hmm.
And I did some heavy duty research, and then I sat in front of a formatted Word document and in my spooky writing chamber and said, what am I going to write about? Golem. And within 60 seconds, the entire story, the characters, the plot, I could see their faces, I could see the interactions. The entire thing came to me in 60 seconds. Then it took maybe, I don't know, we'll say with the copy edits and the back and revisions, catching my own errors and fixing them, maybe 60 hours to write it.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, not long.
So I have a theory. I have like a fantastical theory about when that happens because I, for the last 2 years, have been trying to write a manuscript, and even though like logic wise, it all made sense. It was a natural progression. I couldn't write it because I couldn't see it like in my head. And then back in December, a new idea hit me and suddenly I saw everything. And I within a month had it entirely outlined and chapter summaries and world built. And to me, it's like it's a different experience when you're seeing it versus when you're trying to force it. And I'm always wondering, like, when I'm in the process of seeing it, it's like I'm peering through into an alternate parallel universe where all these events actually happened. I'm just now translating it for other people to read.
Oh my gosh. Well, so perfectly crystallized. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like a mini movie
Hmm.
in your
Yeah.
head. And yeah, and your job as author is to, obviously the written communication is so much different than visual. It's to find the right words to evoke the same emotions we feel when watching that mental movie.
Yeah. Exactly. So now when I see people struggling with writer's block, I always hesitate to give advice because I don't know if it's because, like, for me, the writer's block was because I didn't find that alternate universe yet, and I guess that's what I need to fuel my writing. And maybe some people need it and some people don't, but I learned a lot about myself these last couple of years. I'm just grateful to have found that window again.
So what is the genre?
The genre that I'm going into is science fiction. It's post-apocalyptic. I take a little bit from my real life's experience, which is local government, and I'm asking myself, what would happen if people tried to recreate local government in the post-apocalypse? What is a positive, optimistic post-apocalypse experience versus right now I'm watching The Last of Us, and it's a very militarized state of a post-apocalypse. I'm like, let's have fun with this. Like, let's create something that is almost like Parks and Recreation, the TV show, in this desolate kind of landscape. And I realized I really liked that. What I was trying to make happen over the last 2 years was more atmospheric horror. And maybe I just don't have access to that alternate universe. It wasn't quite visibly showing up to me. But anytime I think of speculative futuristic scenarios, that crystal clear.
There you go. No, that's perfect. I mean, William Golding, Lord of the Flies. What happens when kids descend into their own governance?
Mm-hmm.
Stephen King, The Stand. They start over and form their own government. So and look how well The Stand did out
Yeah.
there. Yeah, um,
Well, and I really like the nuances and almost humor too of local government interactions. The comedy of bureaucracy and being able to kind of take real life experiences from that and kind of set it in this area. We'll see how it goes. But anyway, thank you for having that discussion with me. I thought it was an interesting kind of look.
yeah, no, and it's good that you can draw on actual experiences. I can honestly say if anyone reads The Undertaker's Daughter and listens to this podcast, none of the experiences in that book relate to anything real in my life.
So
Okay.
disclaimer, like,
Yeah, a
rest assured.
disclaimer. Yeah, yeah, before people think the author's nuts. No, this is all a vision that came to me like dreams. I also write stories based on nocturnal dreams,
That's
not
right.
just
And a
daydreams.
lot of your bio is about dreams. So tell me a little bit about your experience, your like overall experience with dreams.
Yeah, well, they're constant. They're every night. I never need to subscribe to a Netflix horror channel because I have it all night, every
Oh.
night for my entire life. I don't have pleasant dreams. I have nightmares. I don't know why.
Oh.
But they're very detailed, and I remember them like memories of actual events. You know how people, when they wake, the day crashes in and they forget what
Mm.
they were dreaming about. Not
Hmm.
me.
Wow.
They stay with me like actual memories. So I can remember dreams from when I was 6 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, Yeah, nightmares.
Did that
So
stress you out when you were a kid?
no, and it
Okay.
doesn't stress me out now. It's who knows what dreams are. No one can really. They're kind of like a screensaver on your computer, how it takes blobs and mashes them together, and they make no sense, but there's some pattern to it.
Hmm.
And maybe it's just the mind's pressure valve. But man, mine is just so weird and clear, these
Uh-huh.
these threads. And yeah, I've turned them into stories and sold some of those stories. So,
Well,
you
good
know,
for you for turning that into something profitable.
yeah, right. I mean, I'm stuck with it.
That's
So,
right. Yeah, you got like a really good like a energy tap or a resource and it's unique to you. So yeah, absolutely. Okay,
yeah,
so I have some rapid fire warm-up questions for you. These are questions that I don't believe I sent you because I came up with them after I sent you questions. So this is to just get people warmed up. And I have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 questions. Are you ready?
sure.
Okay. What is your favorite day of the week and why?
Favorite day of the week. Probably Saturday.
Why?
Saturday is the favorite day of the week. Because there is no alarm.
Hmm.
That's
Nice.
why.
So you
That's
can,
it.
so your dreams could last longer.
Exactly.
There you go.
Exactly. Sometimes the alarm pulls me out of one particularly interesting scene, and I resent that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fill in the blank. Taylor Swift is.
Sold out.
Oh. Okay. Would you want invisibility powers or super strength?
Super strength.
Okay. If you could be reincarnated into anything other than a human, if reincarnation was your, afterlife form, what would it be?
A raptor of some kind, eagle or bird of prey.
Okay. You have a guaranteed food source and you can fly high and look down at everyone
Exactly.
else
Exactly. You mate for life. It's almost like being human without all the extra worries.
without the bureaucracy.
There you go.
Have you ever had an encounter with someone that made you think that was supernatural?
Yes.
Ooh, what was it?
My eighth grade social studies teacher. The first house I bought turned out to be directly across the street from my eighth grade history and social studies teacher, who's now an old man. And I started life as an electrician by trade. And he approached me and he said, John, I have a problem I need your help with. I said, sure, Ben, what is that? And he said, I have these. He. Let me just sort of set the stage. His home is ancient. It's been there for a couple hundred years. It's a big old stone house, and apparently his ancestors owned hundreds and hundreds of acres in the area.
Mhm.
And then little by little they sold it off. But he was living in the original homestead, which had these old electrical switches that click. Now everything's silent. Switches are silent. But back then, when AC first happened and the switches were click, click,
Uh-huh.
you know.
Yeah.
So he said, I need you to replace all the switches in my house. And I said, sure, no problem. I'll stop by Home Depot and bring you some switches and I'll do that for you. So as I'm in there replacing his switches, I said, you, I said, Ben, you've been here for your entire life. I would think by now you're kind of used to it. Why do you want to replace the switches now? They work. I mean, these are like classic
Mhm.
switches. He said, well, and he had this big old black Labrador retriever, and he said, well, and it's all like one floor, like his bedroom and the bathroom and the kitchen, they're all on this bottom floor. And he said, well, what happens is I sort of reverse course. I turn out the light in the kitchen, turn out the light in the living room. I leave the light on in the hallway while I use the bathroom. I turn the hallway light off, the bathroom light off, and the last light I turn off is in the bedroom. And in the dark, I climb into bed, and Molly the dog sits at the foot of the bed, and on the floor. And for the last few months during the night, Molly wakes me up growling, and then I hear the switch going off.
Oh, which switch?
Well, that's the thing. I asked him, I said, is it which switch? I mean, if it was the bedroom, the lights would wake you up. He goes, I don't know. Because I get out of bed, I reverse course, I look out, and everything's dark, but the dog is growling every night, and I keep hearing the switches. I said, "Oh, okay. So you feel that your house is haunted?" He said, "John, I don't know what it is, um, but the dog knows it's a problem, and it keeps waking me up on losing sleep. So thank you for replacing the switches." And a week later, I checked in with him, and he said, everything's great. I've been sleeping, and he said, I guess I've learned to live with whatever's in this house.
Yeah, because it's not waking up his dog anymore with the clicking.
Yeah, yep,
Wow.
I know. That's I'm not a ghost guy. I don't generally get turned on by ghost stories, and think there's much to it, but this was real. And if you knew Ben, you know, he is the most guy's almost 90 years old and as sharp as a tack, uses an iPad, does everything online. I mean, this guy is sharp
Well,
and
it sounds
sober.
it sounds like he was super logical too. It's like, I'm not questioning this. I just need my dog to stop growling. I need to sleep, fix my light switches, or at least make them quiet, and then we'll
Yep,
move on.
yep, yep.
Interesting.
Yep.
Interesting. Okay. In the
Uh,
spirit of our topic on resurrections, do you know anyone that's died and come back?
no,
Okay. All
no,
right.
I don't.
Well, thank you for answering my rapid fire warm ups. Let's move on to our topic. So, what interests you in the resurrections topic?
Well, it is the last frontier, isn't it?
Mm,
Um, there's when you're writing horror stories, which is the only I mean, I read outside of horror, but I only write horror. It's what's fascinated me since childhood. Um, it's the last frontier. I mean, who can explore death and what's on the other side and let us know? Nobody, right? Except world religions. One religion uh has claim to deaths and resurrections.
mhm,
Um, Others, they speculate about what's on the other side. But the point is, it's the last great mystery. And if you're going to write horror, um, where does fear, where do those creepy feelings live? Well, pretty much everybody fears death. And even more so, they fear what's on the other side after death.
mhm, mhm.
So that's what I write about. That's it. It fascinates me. I've made it a life study, all these different religions. I read about them all. And a lot of that comes out in my stories.
So before I ask my next question, I want to tell you a story. And I don't know if story is the right word. This is something that happened to me. So when I was very, very young, and it happened before I was the age of 4, and I tend to kind of just group it in that weird nebulous time frame when your brain is kind of, foggy and you can't really retain memories and dreams, and you
Yeah.
suddenly become self-aware, right? When you're like in kindergarten and you're like, "Oh, hi." But before that, when everything is just kind of new, I had a very distinct dream. It was me running around in a garden, and there were a couple other kids with me, and we were all wearing like bonnets and aprons over flower dresses. It was like kind of, I don't even know what time frame I'm pulling that from, but it was a beautiful garden. And in the center of the garden was a shed. And me and the other kids were running from somebody, a man, I'm guessing. We were running from him and we're screaming and screaming and screaming. And finally, he catches me as I'm running around the shed and he shoves me down on the ground. And he's essentially what my little brain could, understand is he's trying to kill me. And then right when I die in the dream, I wake up.
Exactly.
And I was young. Like I did not understand. I couldn't even tell you at that time. Oh yeah, I was wearing this outfit, and it was this time frame, and I got it from this movie. Like it wasn't like that at all. It was an image. It was an experience that I continue to have today, very vivid. That memory hasn't faded, and it's perplexed me. And then I started seeing a lot of stories online where other children are saying really interesting, perplexing things relating to past lives, seeing their like grandparents in pictures, you know what I mean? Like old historic events and talking about it very nonchalantly as if it's no big deal, but only when they're in that very young age. What are your thoughts on those kinds of experiences?
Yeah, well, it's mixed. I mean, again, there's that pressure valve. We all have those dreams where we die and then we wake up or about to die and then we wake up. That's probably pretty universal, but again, I turn to world religions. That this is where recorded history began. It's all about world religion. Um, so for thousands of years, people have been recording things about dreams and the other side. So um, we know that your spirit, your mind, your intellect, and then that thing that drives you inside, that spark of life, whatever that is, spirit, soul, is laid bare. Yeah, you cannot bargain with it. You cannot fill it with comforting narratives to help you through the day. It's just bare. It's naked. It's vulnerable. And that apparently is when the spirit world communicates with people. That's what's been recorded in scriptures. Okay.
Okay.
So it's possible that you know, spirits from another realm can communicate with people in their dreams. Can other people communicate with people in their dreams? Like Anton Szandor LaVey's 1970s Church of Satan claimed that they could cast certain spells and get to people, enemies, etc., when they're asleep. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but in major world religions, spirits communicate with people in their sleep. It's not necessarily your dead relative that's communicating with you. It's a spirit maybe dressed as a dead relative to lower your guard and communicate with you. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because most of the religions believe that the spirit one is asleep until it faces judgment, or in the case of Judaism, a mass resurrection where the disembodied spirit is returned to a renewed, alive body, the same one that you had 2,000 years ago, which is now dust, gets reanimated and the soul rejoins with it. Um,
Is
and
is that
yeah,
like me going into fiction, The Mummy, the movie The Mummy, where they revive the mummy and he just gets his soul as is?
yeah, well, yeah. He gets his soul, but he's still wrapped up and rotting until he does certain things, kills people, and then he
Yeah.
gets like a normal body. But he gets his old handsome body back, but
Mm-hmm.
he has to do all kinds of bad things to get it. But Christianity believes that the spirit sleeps until judged, and if judgment is passed, a new body in a very new place, not Earth.
Not Earth. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So, it's all different beliefs, but sure. I guess there are psychologists and whatnot that try to interpret dreams. But that's a better odds at a casino of hitting the mark.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could be from a spiritual realm, or it could just be your own nonsense screensaver blowing off tension.
Yeah. Let's talk about the different types of returning. And I have the term resurrection as the main title, but I guess in many ways it's really about returning. And I look to probably the most normalized form of resurrection. We don't even think of resurrection is in the symbolism of our sun. And you look into Greek mythology and how there's everything's very cyclical, the seasons, Apollo pulling the sun across the sky, dying at the end of the day, rebirth in the morning. The differences that I came up with were aside from, you know, the literal resurrection, was also reincarnation. And you've mentioned all of these, but I figure we can go over like some examples. So dead and then reborn in a different body. Revival, realistic. So dead and then brought back in the same body. And that I think of medical drama as real life. Revival, fantastical. You were dead and then you were brought back in the same body, but something is different about you. Whether you have more magical powers, you're a zombie, you're a vampire, something of that sort. And then ghost, you're dead, but only your spirit came back. So which one do you want to tackle first?
Um, the you come back different.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So Hindu, many of the Hindu sects believe in a and to a large degree Buddhists almost an endless cycle of life, death, rebirth. Many of the Hindu sects believe that the rebirth, depending on what type of character you had in the last life, if you were a really, really good person, your next cycle may be as a higher animal like a bull, the Brahma bulls, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's why they don't they respect those bulls walk around with the same rights as any pedestrian. Nobody harms them, it's because
Mm-hmm.
they feel it's a reborn human.
And if you
Um,
didn't do a good job in this life, you come back like a worm.
a worm, a fly. I mean, there's one Hindu sect, the Jains, Jains. The Jains that have money hire someone to walk in front of them down the city streets, sweeping the ground so that they do not accidentally step on an insect because they believe those insects are reincarnated people.
Mm. That's a really nice way to extend empathy towards all creatures by having it like directly related to you, the self, rather than like seeing life as this hierarchy where you can just kill anything that you consider beneath you.
Exactly, exactly. And then some believe that the creator, and obviously there's lots of people that believe this all happened through natural forces. The fact that you and I are talking is a result of billions of years of happy accidents. But others believe in an intelligent designer, and that the intelligent designer is also very creative and loving and compassionate. Um, and it's we're like a bio programmer.
Okay.
Think of computers, okay?
Mm-hmm.
What is a computer? It's a collection of parts, and when electricity is introduced, it has a simple operating system. It can't do much, okay? It accepts simple commands, run, turn off, etc. It's not until some loving creative programmer creates something and installs it inside that box, you get something exciting and useful. Um, some people believe that the bio programmer, the ultimate programmer, um, creates programs and installs them in bio boxes. You and I are inside bio boxes with a an expiration date. So, and then what happens to the program after? Well, if it, like I think the movie Tron Legacy with Jeff Bridges
Hmm.
is a metaphor for this belief. Clue turned out to be a bad program that opposed the bio programmer, the great programmer. The parallel between God and Satan and Tron Legacy, between the main character and then this Clue program
Hmm.
that seeks only to corrupt all the other programs into its way of thinking, a lust for power. It truly is an amazing parallel. So, um, given that, the resurrection, uh, in the case of somebody who's bad, a criminal, a murderer, some horrible. This is the Mary Shelley model, I'll call it, right?
Hmm.
Dr. Victor Frankenstein needed genetic material, so he got what he could get, criminals, and chopped them up and sewed them together and introduced life. And maybe he was thinking he was just going to get a simple operating system that would obey simple commands, but instead, somehow the wires got crossed and the criminals program got reinstalled in this sewn together criminal body.
Mm-hmm.
And no matter what Victor Frankenstein intended, it didn't matter to the monster. It had criminal intent from from its creation. So
Speaking speculatively with resurrection, if at the point of death your soul goes somewhere, then when your body is resurrected, is your body, what comes first? Your soul re-entering your body, or your body gets resurrected and calls your soul? What are your thoughts on, like, what informs the other in the case of resurrection?
yeah, well, apparently, again, the body is just a bio box
Okay.
with an expiration date. So the soul came from somewhere else. It goes into the box. The box expires. The soul goes back to where it came from, and then it moves on uh, through to the next box, if you will.
Okay. If you if you were given the ability to be resurrected, would you want your own body back, or would you want a different box?
I'm pretty happy with it. No, I'd want the same one, you know.
Uh-huh.
Maybe a couple inches taller.
Okay. Well, I think I
Yeah.
haven't seen this show in its entirety. It plays in my house a lot. Altered Carbon on Netflix. I believe this is me. One of these days, I should do one of these summaries where I haven't actually watched any of it, but I should tell you what I think it's about. That's what this is right now. Um, Altered Carbon, what I think is happening is that your brain gets, or your soul or something gets re-downloaded into a new frame. And so like each season is a different actor playing the same guy. Um, to me, I'm like, that makes sense, because when you've left your body at the time of death, your body gets gross. Like, I wouldn't want to go back in it, unless going back in it means a rejuvenation of the organs. But I feel like by then the damage is done. So then I'd be like, okay, I'd be down to just be reinserted into a bot. And then, maybe I can choose for myself what I want the bot to look like. I don't know. I don't know if you've seen that.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen it, but that's a really interesting premise. And now that you put it that way, no, I would not want my same aging body back. I would want, if I could resemble myself so that people recognize me, but I'm made of some sort of dark matter that is impervious to cold and aging and whatnot. Yeah, I'd want that, obviously, not the same
Hmm.
old meat puppet.
Yeah. Let's talk about realistic revival. That's when someone's flatlined and they get revived and they're back, right? And there's so many cases where people talk about they were had a sense of peace and serenity, and there's a lot of interpretations of what that could have meant. And then I've seen medical articles talking about how apparently in the last week or so, someone died getting a brain scan, and at the brain scan the parts of your brain where memory takes place lit up. And so they talk about how this is why so many people might see things like right when they're going, or right before the point of death, things seem peaceful, or they see old family members. It's because your memory section of your brain is working. That isn't that interesting?
That is, yeah, because yeah, you hear that life, when your brain, your cognitive brain is certain life is going to end, that all your memories sort of download all at once and reel in front of you and fast forward or whatever. But I've read other stories from people that basically flatlined and came back, that there was nothing at all. So yeah, no, it's interesting.
Yeah,
Um,
because you also talk about head trauma, like when so many times people with head trauma won't remember certain things, and that's supposed to be, I mean, for various reasons, but a popular theory is that's the brain protecting you. Same with just general trauma, but the idea that you have memory loss at that moment. So then you've got two schools of thought. You experience all these great memory things at a point of extreme trauma, or you don't have anything at all. It's nothing.
exactly, exactly. Well, from a physiological standpoint, um, the brain is the last organ to admit defeat. So, if in one of my stories, a guy throws himself in a wood chipper. So,
Damn. That
yeah,
sounds
yeah,
brutal.
yeah. Well, he's driven to it. He's
Okay.
haunted.
Ouch.
So feet first, he drops in. So I had to do some research so that I could make that story pop.
Uh-huh.
And apparently the brain it doesn't get the memo. Like you have all this cellular death and all these toxins being dumped as your body is suffering such trauma. Um, and the brain does not get the message that death is certain. Okay. It's the last to admit that I'm not going to recover from this. So people cling to life to the very last second
Ooh.
in cases of trauma. Yeah, it happens. I had to do a deep dive in order to finish that story.
I feel like people are going to learn a lot about human anatomy when they read your work.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, horror is there's a gore element
Hmm.
to horror, not that it's the main focus, but yeah, there's gore is involved for sure. And yeah, it's why? Because it scares people,
Hmm. Oh yeah.
right?
I've been worried. When I was a kid, when I was 6, I remember having this fear that a skeleton would come into my bedroom and chop me in half. Like I was really worried about my stomach because I was like, that's where the skeleton is gonna chop me up. Just
Yeah.
and I don't, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's Edgar Allan Poe, my brother from another mother, favorite author. Pit and the Pendulum, that blade swinging down onto his stomach.
Ugh.
What a way to go, right? And
It makes sense that we'd be all worried about that. These are really vulnerable points of like I was also scared of exposing my wrists when I was in my neck, you know. And I think these are all valid things that your brain's like keep trying to stay safe.
yeah, right. The brain uh wants those super vulnerable areas protected. And yeah, I mean, the history shows a long and gory history of people being sawed in half in a hollow log and impaled, and it gut pain is the worst of all, right?
Yeah.
So I can see
Oh,
why if you're gonna have a nightmare, that would be it.
yes. All right. Anything else you want to add about revival realistic before we move on to revival fantastical?
No, no, I think we covered it. Like I say, the Mary Shelley model, reanimated corpses with a criminal bent, is always scary and always popular.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you know, Vampires and werewolves. I think they were based on real, not real. Like vampires aren't real and werewolves aren't real, but serial killers have always been around. This is not some new thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I don't cater much to vampire and werewolf stories. It's not scary because it's humans in small towns preying on other humans, and then all the fingers are pointing, and no one can believe it's one of their own doing it.
Right.
So they make up a creature, and
Yeah.
then after a few generations, that story gets passed down, and you tell a lie for a number of hundreds of years, it becomes real.
Mm-hmm.
So those things don't cater to the horror world in my book. I mean, I found Twilight very entertaining. But I think there's a 13-year
Did
old
you read
girl
it?
in me. Yeah, Stephanie Meyer, and then the movies. This girl that worked for me, she gave me a plaque when she left. TYOG. She called me 13-year-old girl because I was such a Twilight fan. But
I love
yeah,
that.
yeah, she was a young intern, but she just couldn't believe that I so got into it. But I did. It's very entertaining, but no,
But not horror.
it's not scary. Yeah,
Hmm.
vampires and werewolves are just crazy lure based on real murderers.
No, it's very true, especially when you think of like zombies. But right now with The Last of Us, I haven't played the video game. I'm familiar with the music because I listen to video game soundtracks when I write. So it was kind of fun to kind of go, hey, I'm kind of cool when the show came out. But the premise behind that with their zombies is that it's a fungus that's infected you, and in the animal world, there's a fungus that takes over a bug and it slowly takes over its body and imitates parts of its, organs and such. And the bug the entire time is kept alive. And finally, I think eventually the fungus leads the body to, I don't know, like to its prey, so that the fungus can then go on to infect another body and move on from there and there. And I have heard about that in the bug world. The bug world is terrifying. I feel like you could take a lot of inspiration for horror from the bug world. But yeah,
Yeah.
the idea that you're infected and that's what the zombie represents is, pandemics and illness.
Well, did you see the Will Smith movie I Am Legend?
Years ago when it first came out. So my memory is a little shaky.
Yeah, yeah. So that is exactly what you're talking about. The movie's loaded with zombies. They call them dark seekers, but in my opinion, it's the best zombie movie ever made. And it's exactly that. It was a Crippen virus that it, people that it didn't kill, it resurrected as these dark seekers that feed on anything that's alive, including other, people. Um, so well done that movie. Usually, you want if you feel like getting creeped out and get a good scare, um, watch it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One example I have of a non, I guess, scary revival fantastical. And I was really trying to think about this. Like I'm like, okay, uh Jon Snow in Game of Thrones. Have you seen Game of Thrones?
I did not.
Okay. Well, I'm just gonna spoil it for you then, because
That's fine because I'll never binge watch something that long.
that's like when you're sick, you turn that on and you get
Uh,
started when you're sick. Okay. Jon Snow, by the time you get to, I don't even know what season, way towards the end, he's killed off by one of his own guys, a kid actually, and he's put on this table. And meanwhile, all the fans that are watching this are like, what's going to happen? And to me, this is like the standard hero's journey, right? So resurrection is a huge part of the hero's journey. The hero's journey doesn't really become the hero until they've died and come back in many examples. And so here's another one. And Jon Snow gets resurrected by the Game of Thrones people are going to be mad at me. The red sorceress, Melisandre, I think is her name. I am so sorry, I forgot that. But anyway, he gets resurrected, and only then is it's like, oh, okay, now he's the hero that was promised. Um, and that's a really interesting idea, like plot structure for resurrection, where you aren't actually who you're called to be until you've been through it. What are your thoughts on that?
huh. Okay, that's interesting. Um yeah, I guess it makes sense from a fictional narrative point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's I don't think it's been done before. Has it?
It's like, for example, Neo in the Matrix
Oh,
gets
oh, oh.
killed, and then I've already complained about this already on here. I hate True Love's kiss brings someone back to life. But that's, Trinity brings him back to life, but he's not the one until he's been killed.
Yes, yes, yes. That's which is a fantastic premise and it's a great movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Uh, I mean,
I guess
generally,
I
yeah.
mean, it refers to Jesus, right? Jesus didn't prove his, I get, people there were doubters, right? That led to his being put on the cross, and then 3 days later he shows up resurrected, and now he's, oh yeah, like there's like this collective acknowledgement that he is that hero that he was saying he was, but up until that point there was a lot of doubts, that
Right, right.
narratively, I mean.
Yeah, which it still puzzles me because his inner circle watched him restore Lazarus and
Mm-hmm.
12-year-old girl and perform all these supernatural acts but they thought that death could defeat him and they were surprised when they learned it couldn't.
Good point.
Yeah, it's I don't know why they were surprised.
Well,
I
and
know
even
they were
that
happy.
format is, I mean, I believe there are other, I have to refer to one of the 12 Days of Tropes episodes that I did on resurrections, where a lot of other mythologies also have that same exact story structure. A spiritual being dies and comes back, is resurrected in some way, shape, or form. So it's interesting to see that reflected across all these major religions of like a single being entity. And I always think about what does that mean for us as humans to be, what's the common thread? Why do we like that narrative so much? Is it because, does it go back to Greek mythology where the sun sets and we're like, oh my God, the sun died. And then the sun came up. Oh, okay, we're okay. We'll live another day. You know what I mean? Like, does it go as far back as that? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like I say, the last great frontier is also the greatest fear. Edgar Allan Poe called it the last great change, but
Mm-hmm.
it's the only thing that science can explain, eventually, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, like you just imagine 20,000 BC, bunch of or 30,000, bunch of cave dwellers in Altamira. They had the same questions that we have now. Uh, where did we come from? Who made us? Where do we go after we die? They had funerals. They're finding 50,000-year-old corpses buried with tools and things like that. Um, Man hasn't changed. Humanity. I
Mm-hmm.
don't mean to be pronoun ignorant here, but humanity hasn't changed. Um, it's the technology has advanced, science has, and peace. So we're not always at war. Allowed science to advance, and science has answered a lot of those questions. But there's one great question that everybody, where did I come from and where am I going? So that's why it fascinates us. Everybody wants to know. And
Mm-hmm.
there are some people that just, uh, they've sort of given up and they go, when I'm dead, there's nothing. It's just eternal blackness. These are very unhappy people. That everyone else is like, well, I'm doing all this stuff here on Earth, I'm trying to make my mark in the world and leave children behind and everything else. What's my reward?
Mm-hmm.
You know, what's the pot of gold at the end? And most people want to believe there's something beyond physical death. So that's why everybody's fascinated,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
If you could choose to come back again after death, would you prefer to remember your past life or continue on in ignorance?
Oh, I'd want to remember it.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, wouldn't you? All life's lessons and all that.
I think so. I think so. I think I lived a life where I feel like I've learned a lot so far, and I'd like to be able to bring that with me. I feel like there's so many mistakes and accidents that be nice to not have to relive. uh yeah.
Well,
Okay.
what if it was selective?
Mm.
So, all right, let me give you an example. You are Saint Bartholomew was skinned alive for
Oof.
his faith, skinned alive. Um, let's say he dies, and in the resurrection, he's given a new body and vast knowledge and the trust of the great bioprogrammer. Trusts him because of the faith he showed right to the very end. And he asks him the question, do you want to remember the last couple hours of your life? Well, what's he going to say?
Mm.
No, no way. I don't ever want to relive that memory. What if it could be selective?
Oh.
What if you could remember the people you love, your family, the beautiful moments with those people, but you could just flick a switch and forget all the times people broke your heart, stole from you, lied to you. You could just forget all that.
Yeah.
That that'd be a good solution.
Well, that actually segues into the next question, which was in any form of resurrection, what is a scary downside to coming back after death? And I would think that's a really good answer for that. If you were to remember how you died and all the trauma associated with that and all the negativity.
Exactly, exactly. And it's the Undertaker's daughter, not to do a complete spoiler, but um we do have resurrection of a very, very bad soul. Um, and that was not the intent. It was supposed to be a simple program, an operating system in a box, but it turns out some wires, ethereal wires, get crossed,
Uh-huh.
and the original inhabitant of the corpse, who was executed for his crimes, uh, is back. So,
Interesting. Yeah, that's a
yeah,
downside. You're like,
yeah,
whoops, not what I had planned.
yep. So yeah, it can take simple commands, but it blends with that criminal agenda that it had. So
You might recall the title of this story better than me. I think it's a Poe story. It could also not be, but it's when someone is given wishes and to varying, negative outcomes, and finally one of the wishes is for someone that has recently passed to come back, and as the when the person shows up, the idea is that the person literally came back straight out of the grave. Like they're
Yeah,
not who they are. Do you know that story I'm talking about?
monkey's paw.
Yes. Do you want to
Yeah.
tell that story? You might tell that story better than me if you remember.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, that's an old classic. Husband and wife living with their son. The son dies, and they are crushed. He's their entire world, and they loved him so much. And they buy an alleged magical monkey's paw, like a taxidermy's paw, that grants three wishes. And again, like simple commands, they wish for the return of their son with no details. Like,
Mhm.
we wish him to, we wish time to turn back 2 months
Yeah.
and have him return as he was. No, no, it's all about, be careful what you wish for. They said, we want our son back. And then, there's knocking at the door, and it's their son as he is now, decomposed. And yeah, that it's a great thread. I tap it in one of my stories, uh, uh, called Family Plot. But yeah, it's been done. It's been redone. It's one of the classic tropes, if you will.
Yes. And I was wrong. It wasn't by Poe, by W. Jacobs, correct?
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly. It was not Poe.
All right.
Um, yeah.
I saw a stage performance of it, and that moment when their son is arriving at the door, they used really impressive silhouette lighting to kind of show that there's this hideous form and you don't really see what they look like. And I think that they cancel it out right when she opens the door. So when she opens the door, there's nothing there. But I was really young when I saw that and it stuck with me. It was a really powerful scene.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's I could see why.
Uh-huh.
Do you remember the Night Gallery with Rod Serling?
I don't, you might need to refresh my memory.
Well, it was 70s, so you're
Okay, then I don't think
um
I've seen it.
no, I'm almost 60 years old, so I was a kid when I saw that. And they had it was a regular terrestrial TV series, which is all you had back then, no cable or streaming. Um and it was horror. And yeah, it was a take on the monkey's paw, where this great actor Roddy McDowall um, essentially murders his uncle and buries him in the family plot with the intent of inheriting all of the uncle's wealth. And there's a painting on the wall of the family plot, and there's Roddy McDowall sipping his brandy and smoking his cigar, and he's staring at that art on the wall, and it changed. There's a new fresh grave with fresh dirt heaped on top, and he's
Ooh,
staring at it.
uh-huh.
And then all of a sudden, you look at Roddy's face, and then he's still staring at the picture, and his eyes get wider. The grave is open. The dirt is blown all out, and the headstone fell down. And then you see this character in a black suit that he was buried in, lurching, scene by scene towards the house.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's and then he dies of fright. And it turns out that Ozzie Davis, the butler, great actor, staged the whole thing, had a bunch of different paintings drawn up, and he did this because he was next in line to inherit.
Oh.
So he's sitting there sipping his brandy and smoking his cigar and staring at the painting, which has changed and now has a second fresh grave, and this time it's not manipulated. Roddy McDowell comes back and
Oh,
kills Ozzy. Yeah, it's scary.
wow.
It stuck with me all these years. It's one of the best horror shorts ever.
I love it. That's so good.
I know. I know. It's on YouTube.
Okay, I'll check it out. So what was it called
Yeah.
again?
Night Gallery. And they had a pilot for the Night Gallery, which turned out to be, a series, but it was one of three stories that was part of that original pilot. So I would look under Night Gallery pilot.
Okay. So what if what should a writer considering writing about resurrection know? What is your advice?
Uh, uh just, you know, firm up in your mind your own beliefs. Because you can't excite other people unless you excite yourself.
Okay. And how involved should they get with anatomical things?
Well, I think very because, if the like Stephen King says, what is horror? Um, terror is feeling dread that something frightening is going to happen. Horror is the shock and the repulsion of seeing it. So if you want to cover the full, and then there's just Stephen King says I'm not above going for the gross out.
Hmm.
Okay.
Oh, well, he
So,
wrote was it called The Raft? Did you read
the
that short story?
raft. Oh,
Where
I read all of them.
these kids are riding on a raft and there's a black blob in the
Yes,
river.
yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And one guy, like the blob, reaches up and grabs him down, and he's a monster basically.
Yep,
But one guy
yep.
is lying on the raft, and the blob comes up through the wood, through like a little hole,
And
and
pulls them
grabs
down
and
through
pulls
the
him
yep.
through the hole. And Stephen King defines everything that happens to that guy physically as he's getting squeezed through this tiny little hole. And I read that when I was a kid because my dad had a collection of Stephen King shorts.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I was a little traumatized. It was so graphic.
Yep. Yep. I recall that story intimately. And yeah, I mean that's what if you're serving the horror genre, you deliver terror, you deliver horror, and the gross out. And I've been criticized, but also highly complimented on the anatomical gross outs that I have in my published work. Um, one reviewer said, "This story scared the sleep out of me. I literally lost sleep."
Wow.
Yeah,
You're like,
so
thank you.
I know, really, that was a mic drop moment for me. I said, "Yes, I am. My work is done here."
Perfect.
But
And what about
yeah,
people that aren't doing horror, but they want to explore resurrection, like a fantasy story or sci-fi?
well, yeah. I mean, like I say, Stephanie Meyer did a great job with it.
With their
Uh,
non-horror vampire books.
yeah, but well, it depends. Again, a good story is a good story, and if you understand what makes a good story, what engages people, you have relatable characters, and they meet with challenges over and over, and each time they try to resolve the challenge, they just sort of dig their hole deeper. And finally, at the end, due to some, might be super strength or emotional strength, physical strength, ingenuity, whatever, they solve the problem, and that's the general path of a story. Every story, right?
Hmm.
Every good story that's lasted. There's a hero, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you work resurrection in, I mean, what's the greatest story ever told, right? It's like you mentioned it, Christ uh peacefully gave up his life as a ransom for sinners, and came back and revealed himself to them and others, 500 plus people. Um, so that story is the greatest ever told. There's movies called The Greatest Story Ever Told. It's all about the story of Christ. So, if it's a compelling story, you have to figure out a way to work resurrection into it, following the story, format. So it doesn't have to be horror. It could be a happy thing.
Mm-hmm.
Some like terms of endearment, except she lives at the end. She dies but comes back.
Yeah. Or it's the inciting incident. She comes back, and now what is she going to do with her
Right.
life
Yeah.
resurrected?
Yeah. Finds the she devotes her life and actually finds the cure to the major cancers.
Oh, there you go. All right. Well, John, thank you so much for joining me. This has been a really interesting hour and spooky hour, actually. So, do you have any final notes and promos that you'd like to leave us with?
No, just thank you for having me. It was a great chat, and I would recommend you and any of your fans and listeners check under your bed every night, because that thing you think lives there does. And one of these days it's going to come out. It's going to come up at the foot of the bed and eat you feet first, alive and screaming.
And then drag you down, and you're going to be squished through a tiny little opening under your bed, anatomical detailed and everything.
All teeth. Yep.
Speculative Sandbox is a volunteer-run podcast that relies on the collaboration of fellow creators like you. Join the conversation and participate in fun polls and questionnaires on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. Interested in being in a future episode? Our DMs are open, or you can email speculativesandbox@gmail.com.